Somebody's brought two pictures for us to look at. Do you want me to start with them? Or has anybody got any specific questions? No? Start with them. Sorry, what's your name? James. So James has brought two pictures in that... did you show these the other week?
I didn't get to show them, no. A couple of people saw them.
Right, and they commented on them.
Yeah.
So we're doing Photoshop tonight, aren't we?
Yeah.
Right, well I won't do anything in Lightroom to it then, I'll just open it straight in Photoshop. Like I say, the way I work, I will do a little bit in Lightroom first before it goes over into Photoshop. But we did Lightroom the other week, so I'll do everything in Photoshop this time. Normally if you open your RAW, the RAW converter will come up first, unless you've come from Lightroom, which is what I'm going to do. If you've come from Lightroom, it knows you've done the RAW conversion in Lightroom, so it'll just open in Photoshop. So from Lightroom, it's photo, editing, and then editing the version of Photoshop that you've got. Right, so the image is opened. It's a CR2, so I'm guessing it's a Canon file, is it?
Yes.
Right. So what did we want to do to it? What had people suggested to you? Sorry, I'll just resize Photoshop. It's well, to be honest with you, I would have started in Lightroom by to see if there's any detail in the sky.
Yeah.
What I can do is I can do a second conversion in Lightroom, and then show you two layers, one with the sky conversion and one with the foreground conversion, then combine the two in Photoshop. Do you want me to do it that way? Yeah? Right, so that's the bog standard one opened.
Yeah.
So if I go back to Lightroom now and see if there is any detail in the sky, and we'll do a second conversion for the sky, and then in Photoshop combine the two.
So the HDR thing?
Yeah, yeah. So there is some detail in the sky. Yeah. And depending on how you like it, you can bring some of that detail out, can't you? In fact, I'll overdo it. Because if I overdo it, I can then, when I show you in Photoshop, I can reduce its opacity to show you how you can blend the two layers together. So I've overdone it there, haven't I? That's a graduated filter, and I've reduced the highlights in Lightroom. I wasn't going to do anything on Lightroom because we did that 2 or 3 weeks ago, didn't we, I think? So once you've done it again, you can go back to photo, editing, and edit in Photoshop again. It'll now send that conversion over to Photoshop as well. So I'll end up with two pictures in Photoshop, which I can then combine together. So at the moment it's open two separate pictures. What I'm going to do is drag the top picture down, so that I then expose both pictures one after the other, yeah? So I'm going to drag the background layer off the front picture, which is the active one, and drop it on the back picture. So as I drag the background layer, you can see that this white border comes round on the background image. That means that's where I'm going to drop the layer. Now if I drop the layer, it will just drop it wherever I place it, yeah? But if I hold down the Shift key, it will drop it in line with the image underneath. So I've held down the Shift key and dropped it. So now, if you look at this picture, I've got two images. If I go back to the original picture that I've just dragged and dropped, which is there, you can see that there's only actually one background layer. Now I don't need that picture anymore, so I'm going to close it down. So if I close that one down, it'll ask if I want to save it. I'm not bothered, I'll just click Don't Save. So now on this image, because we've dragged and dropped the other image onto it, two background layers. Top layer shows the conversion with the sky. Bottom layer just shows the original conversion with no Lightroom edits on it. Yeah? Straight away I think the Lightroom one's a lot better because of the sky. But it's whether you wanted that sort of sky in it. So to combine the two, the only thing that the top one's doing is this darkening round here, isn't it? Yeah, it's darkening them trees, which you might not want to darken. Yeah? You might want them trees at the natural brightness, which was that. So what we're going to do is we're going to hide some of that top layer. So to hide it, the way I work, I use a layer mask. So a layer mask will hide or show certain parts of a layer. By default, we're going to add a layer mask, so it's the third icon in on the, if you can see, can you see where my mouse is? Yeah. The third icon in shows you add layer mask. Now if I click on that, it will add a white layer mask. Now a white layer mask does nothing. So white shows what's on the layer, black will hide what's on the layer. So if I click on the layer mask, you'll see up there a little white mask has appeared next to the thumbnail. If I just, 1 second. Make them big. So you can see now that we've got a layer mask next to the layer itself. Yeah? Because it's white, that layer is showing. So what you can do with the layer mask active, now you know it's active because it's got a little white box around it. If you click on the actual image itself on that layer, the box moves across, yeah? So you want to be on the layer mask. If we take a black brush, I'll just choose a standard brush, which is there. Now if I choose black as my foreground colour, wherever I paint in black, it will hide what's on that layer and allow the layer that's underneath to show through. Is that making sense? Yeah? So if I paint in black in this area here, I'm not clicking yet, but if I paint in black on that area there, it will hide the dark layer and allow the original conversion to show through. And the original conversion was lighter, wasn't it? Yeah. So if I start and click there, now I've set my brush opacity to 30%. So rather than it building straight up to black, it's building it up in greys. Think of the opacity as like using watercolours. When you were painting with watercolours, you paint over in like a wash and then paint over it again, it builds the colour up. So think of opacity as doing that. In Photoshop you can alter the brush size by using the square bracket keys, which is what I'm doing there. So you can see that by adding that layer mask, I've brightened them trees back up to what they were originally, yeah? And that's because it's hiding the top layer and allowing the bottom layer to show through. So we're combining two layers there. So what else do we want to do with the image? Right, did somebody say colour?
Yeah, lift the colours.
Lift the colours. We'll add a little bit of saturation to it. So I'm going to use an adjustment layer. So the 1, 2, 3, 4th icon across, where my mouse is now, that'll add an adjustment layer. Now an adjustment layer doesn't contain any image, but it applies an adjustment to any layers that are below it in the layer stack. So at the moment we've got 2 layers in our layer stack. If I put an adjustment layer on the top, it will apply the adjustment to all the layers underneath it. Do it that way because if you apply an adjustment to one layer, it might look a bit weird because the layer underneath it, which might be showing through, as is in this case, won't have the adjustment made to it. So it'll mismatch. Does that make sense? Yeah. So I'm going to add an adjustment layer to the top. Now the flyout that appears gives you several options, and one of them is hue and saturation. So if we click on that one, we then get this dialog box at the bottom here, or in the middle here. Can you see that or not? The middle section. Top one says hue, then it says saturation, then it says lightness. I'm going to bring the saturation up. Can you see how it's bringing the colours out in the trees and everything? Far too much that, isn't it? Tell me what it looks like on there, because it looks completely different on here. About there, right? Yeah, it looks completely different on here. So I've saturated well, we'll do a contrast thing in a minute. We've saturated the colours underneath that are underneath that adjustment layer, which means that the background layer and the new layer with the sky in it have been adjusted. Now if I move that adjustment layer down, watch what happens to the colours in them trees in the top left. Oh, cancel that. Why won't it move? Talk to me. There. So now if I alter that adjustment layer, I'll saturate it right up just to show you what I mean. See how it's only adjusting the trees in that top corner? Because that's the only bit of the background that you actually see. Yeah. So I've moved that adjustment layer in the stack. So now it's not adjusting the front one, but it's adjusting the back one. So you can see how powerful the adjustment layers are because you can put it anywhere in the stack. So I'll move it back up to the top again. And you can see, ooh. So I'll pull it back down again. Where were we at? Around there somewhere, was it? Somewhere like that, wasn't it? Right. So we said there it's still a little bit flat. So we could try a curves adjustment at the top. So we've added saturation adjustment layer. If we click on another adjustment layer, we could choose, I often use curves for boosting contrast or whatever. So we'll go to the curves layer, and you can see straight away we've got a curves dialog box down here. It's a little bit small actually, isn't it? Let's drag it across and make it a bit bigger. There you are, you can see the curves adjustment layer a bit better now. So this is the adjustment box for a curves adjustment layer. Yeah? Does everybody know how curves work? Yeah? No? Anybody doesn't? Talk now. Everybody knows? Cool. It means I don't have to explain it. So what you would do with a curve is apply an S, basically, to increase contrast. So we'll keep the black point where it is, keep the white point where it is for now. We might move it in a minute. We'll add a middle point. We'll add one at the top quarter and one at the bottom quarter. And then if we increase the top quarter upwards and bring the bottom quarter down, we will increase contrast in the image. And I'm just going to drag that and drop that back where it was. Oh, that'll do, yeah. So we've increased the contrast in the image quite a lot there, haven't we? Maybe too much. Right, two ways around it. We can go back into the adjustment layer and adjust it again if we wanted to. Or because it's on its own layer, we can reduce the opacity of that layer. At the moment it's at 100%. Yeah? And I'll quite often do this. I'll quite often overcompensate on the layer and then reduce its opacity down so that I can visually see, you know, where I want it. Does that make sense? Yeah? Yeah, it's more control. Quite often I'll put an S curve on that's way too contrasty and then reduce its opacity till I get it nice or where I want it. So looking at this top layer, can you see how at the moment it's in the top corner there it says opacity of 100%? So if I click and drag on the word on the word opacity and drag left, you can see how it starts to reduce the opacity in that checkbox. So it's what do they call them? Scrubbable. That's what Adobe call them, I think. It's a scrubbable word. So you can click on it and scrub left and right, and it increases or decreases the value in the box. So we can decrease that opacity of that contrast layer until we get it where we want it. Where do we want it? Talk to me. Bit more or a bit less? Upwards. About there. 69%. Now show the original. Right, in Photoshop, if you hold down the... What key do you use if you're using a PC? Come on. Alt. You use a Mac, don't you? Hold down the Alt key and press the... and click the eye icon on the back layer, on the background layer. It will just show the background layer. It turns all the others off. So that's the original. Now if I hold down the Alt key and click the eye again, that's the after. So before and after. Is there anything else you want to do on it?
You might want lightning in, maybe levels.
Lightning in where? The shadows.
Yeah, some sort of thing like, yeah.
She's used it as a dodge and burn layer. Right, I'll show you how to do a dodge. I don't like doing it this way because I think it introduces a bit of a slight colour cast on it.
Yeah.
So if you add a new layer and you set it to overlay, basically it does nothing. But if you paint in black on an overlay layer, it will darken it, and if you paint in white, it'll lighten it. So it's like a dodge and burn layer.
Similar,
Yeah.
Did it go to what do you call it?
Did you not?
The doctor, no, just went straight to the bush.
Right.
Picked up the bush, finished, made it like what you got there, black and white. And then,
What areas do we want to lighten or darken? You were on about lightening the shadows, weren't you?
yeah,
It's your picture, so we'll lighten the shadows.
yeah.
Them areas there.
There was lighting if you could, yeah.
So we'll, if I create a layer and set it to overlay, it does nothing. But if I paint white, it will lighten it, and if I paint black, it'll darken it. And because it's set in overlay, it doesn't show the white. It just brightens or darkens. Does that make sense? Yeah. So if I set it to my brush to white, and I set it to a low opacity, I'll set it to something like 10% or something like that. That's at 8% at the moment. And if I paint in one of these darker areas, it should lighten it a little bit. Now it might take a few brush strokes to do it. So we've brightened that area up a little bit, haven't we? In fact, my brush stroke's gone right across, hasn't it? Right, so we were on about what? High pass sharpening, right. So to sharpen the whole picture, is that what you're on about? Right, to sharpen the whole picture, I'm going to have to flatten it. Yeah? Are we happy with the adjustments we've done so far? Because if I flatten it, I can't do anything with it unless I create a new layer and flatten it into a new layer. And I don't know how long it'll take it to do that. I'll try it, but we might have to talk amongst ourselves a minute. If I hold down the Alt key and hit the fly out next to the layers palette, halfway down it says merge visible. If I hold down the Alt key, are you listening, Mac user? Hold down the Alt key and release the mouse when it's on merge visible. It creates a new layer, merges all the original layers and puts them into the new layer. Don't ask me how to do it on a PC. There is a keyboard shortcut for it, but I don't know what it is. It'll be Control or Shift or one of them wonderful windows. Pardon?
Alt's quite often the same.
Is it? Ah, well, there you go. It might be Alt as well. So it's merging all the layers, putting them into one layer at the top. So we've created a new layer at the top when it pops up. There it is. And that new layer right at the very top, we can now apply a high pass filter to. We then combine that layer with the layers underneath to do the sharpening. Is that how you do it? All right.
So
Right.
basically all the other layers are just turned off, although we
No,
can see
all the other layers are still there.
it. Yeah, I mean they're turned off out.
No, they're still there. They're just underneath that top layer at the moment.
Yeah.
So the top layer, I'm going to go to Filter, Other, High Pass. And the high pass works by creating a black and white image from whatever layer it's on. And that black and white image, it looks for areas of contrast, like lights and darks, yeah? Yeah. Yeah, so if you look at that radius is a little bit high, so I'll bring the radius back down a bit. So your file size is probably different to mine. My high pass will have been quite high because it might have been one of my big files that it's working on. So can you see how the high pass there is now creating what do they call it? Like a bas relief sort of thing, isn't it? Where it's like shades of grey. There's a song there somewhere, isn't there? So the shades of grey in there. So if we click OK to that, at the moment it will just apply that filter to the image. Yeah. But what it's basically done is looked for contrast areas and created that grey to white to black sort of area across the contrasty areas. So you'll see like them white halos around the hills and round the, yeah. So what we do now is we change the blending mode of that layer from normal, because at the moment it looks weird, doesn't it? So we want that to blend differently with the underlying layers. Yeah? So if we change it from normal to, which one did you use? Hard light gives the highest effect. So if we set it to hard light, you'll see the sharpening now is quite pronounced, isn't it? So if I click on and off that top layer, there's the before and there's the after. So that sharpening is quite pronounced, isn't it? In fact, probably too pronounced. Well, it is. It looks all right on there, but it looks absolutely horrendous on it. Yeah. But so it's not the picture looks horrendous, but the sharpening does. Yeah. It doesn't look too bad on screen up there, but on here it looks really over sharpened. No, it's over sharpened on here. Well, it's personal preference, isn't it? But because we've got it on a new layer, that effect has been applied. We've created the hard light blending mode, so it's sharpened the image underneath. You can change that hard light to something like soft light, and it reduces the amount of sharpening. And if you reduce it again to overlay, it reduces it even more. You obviously probably wouldn't see it on there. But another way of doing it is to keep it at hard light, and going back to the method we used before, we reduce the opacity of that layer. And by reducing the opacity, we reduce how much sharpening we're applying. So tell me where on that picture up there, because on here it looks completely about there. So we've got about 51% of that layer being used. So now if I click on and off that sharpening layer, you can see. So that's using a high pass layer at the top to sharpen everything underneath. And I've done it non-destructively, because you can see it's all on separate layers. So if I mess up and decide I don't like it, the only problem is if you do a big edit underneath, then the top layer won't reflect that, will it? So the top layer sharpening might not match what you do underneath. So if you clone like that, if you clone this fence out on the image underneath, the sharpening will still be there for the fence. So it'll look weird.
You're saying we should do sharpening mask?
Yes, yeah. Well, we can do our before and after again if you want. If I alt click on the original again. Can we do what?
Can we selectively apply?
Yes, that high pass, because it's on its own layer, we can apply a layer mask to it, so we can selectively sharpen certain areas. A good use of that is if you don't want, if you like this one here, if we don't want to sharpen the sky, this one's not so bad because the sky's quite got quite a lot of detail in it. But if you've got a bland sky, you don't want to sharpen the sky, because on a bland sky it brings out all the grain or any imperfections in your image. So what you could then do is selectively sharpen the foreground, just mask out the sky using a layer mask for the high pass filter layer. On portraits, a lot of people will do a portrait, use a high pass, and the high pass will only sharpen the eyes, because they don't want the skin sharpening because it shows imperfections in the skin. So it's same, exactly the same technique.
So is it easier to make the selection around, like you say, like eye?
I always,
or on that, say,
I always,
selection round the fence?
I very, very rarely make a selection. I just paint in the areas that I do and don't want to see.
So you just lay a mask on
Yeah,
that.
and make sure it's got like a feathered edge to it, so that there's no define between. In here, what we want to do is reduce the exposure in the areas down here, don't we? I don't know whether it'll work, but we'll try. So if I go to another adjustment layer and go for another curves layer, just drag that up so I can see what I'm doing. Make it a bit bigger. So on this, I'm going to look at purely at the foreground here, haven't I? Because I'm going ignore everything that's going on in the sky, and I'm going to drag. Oh, you can see a bit, can't you? Yeah, it is there, yeah. So I'm going to drag this. By dragging the centre of a curve, you adjust the mid-tones. So I'm dragging the mid-tones down and making them darker. If I dragged it the other way, it'd make the mid-tones lighter. So I've dragged the mid-tones down, and I'll overdo it a little bit and reduce the opacity in a minute. Let's just drag that back out of the way. Oh, is that a dot that one? Maybe not. Right, so on this top adjustment layer, we've got a layer mask automatically on it. So what I need to do on the layer mask is paint in what colour to hide it? Black. This has got to be a night. No, actually, I'll do it the quicker way. At the moment that layer mask is black, I want it to be white. So if I hit... Who? Yeah, I want it to be black, sorry. Edit. I was hitting the right keyboard shortcut, why wasn't it working? If I hit Apple and I, it'll invert that layer mask from black to from white to black. So it's, what is that in PC world? Control and I? Could be. Something and I. On a Mac it's the Apple symbol and I. It's Command and I. So it inverts the white mask to create a black mask. I'm doing it that way because what I don't want is to paint all of it in black. I'd rather paint the small bit at the bottom in white. So once I've inverted it, I can then choose white and start and paint in white along the bottom. That's added a little bit of darkness to the foreground there, hasn't it? Let's increase it right up so I can do it quicker. And see what it does. So I'm painting in white in this foreground area to try and darken that highlight at the foreground. Has it worked? Yeah, yeah, but I've just got to turn it on and off now to see what it does. So it is darkening that area a little bit, isn't it?
On the black layer, you can see where
Yeah, yeah,
it's gone white.
yeah. So it's getting there. If you played around with it for a bit, you could darken that foreground to match the sky. What do we think of it then? Before and after again.
Although it only changed the sky.
That's you before.
That sky that you changed it to,
That's your
is in
after.
that water. It's there.